When Rachel Bennett vanishes without a trace, her husband Tom is left to raise their children alone, haunted by unanswered questions and a past that won't let go. A decade later, a random frame from a security camera reignites a mystery he thought was buried forever and unearths a truth far more complex than he could have imagined. Before we dive in, please like this video, subscribe to the channel, and let us know in the comments where you're tuning in from. Your support helps us create more deep and gripping stories just for you. There's more to come. The morning began the way so many others had for Tom Bennett. Half awake, sleep still clinging to his limbs, the scent of brewing coffee teasing him out of bed. The soft shuffle of little feet down the hallway reminded him, like every other weekday, that he was a father before anything else. Emily, 8, was already tugging on her school uniform, and Max, 5, was sitting cross-legged in the kitchen, focused intently on a juice box he hadn't yet opened. Rachel's voice had echoed gently through the house just an hour earlier, reminding Emily to brush her teeth, tying Max's shoelaces, humming some unplaceable tune while scrambling eggs in the pan. It wasn't unusual for Tom to be the last one to join the morning bustle. Rachel was always up first, holding things together like the quiet center of their small world. But when he walked into the kitchen that morning, something felt still, too still. Plates were set. The egg sat lukewarm on ceramic. A slice of toast was half buttered, knife resting beside it. The coffee was poured, steam long gone. But Rachel was gone too. "Where's Mom?" he asked, expecting a mundane answer. In the shower, getting dressed, took out the trash. "I don't know," Emily mumbled through a mouthful of egg. Tom called her name. Once. Twice. He walked through every room, bedroom, bathroom, backyard. Her purse was there. Car keys, untouched. No note. No messages. Just absence. At first, he tried to rationalize it. Maybe she went for a walk. Maybe a neighbor needed help. Maybe she just needed a breather. She hadn't been sleeping well lately. That much he knew. But Tom had never known Rachel to leave without saying anything. Not to him, not to the kids. She wasn't impulsive. She wasn't the disappearing type. He got the kids to school, somehow, and returned home to wait. He paced, checked the phone for messages that weren't there, called her number repeatedly. Texts went unanswered. By lunchtime, he called her friends. Her sister. No one had heard from her. By mid-afternoon, the excuses he'd invented began to fray. He sat in the living room, staring at the half-empty coffee cup she'd left behind, as if it might offer a clue he'd missed. As the sky darkened, a heavy dread set in. He called the police. The dispatcher's voice was calm, clinical. "How long has she been missing, sir?" "She was here this morning. She made breakfast. Then she was just gone." "Do you suspect she left voluntarily?" "I don't know," he said, the truth of it landing cold in his throat. "I just know she wouldn't do this. Not like this." He didn't sleep that night. The silence of the house screamed louder than the kids ever had. Every creak in the floorboards, every gust of wind tapping the windows sent his mind racing. Her jacket was still hanging by the door. Her toothbrush in the holder. Nothing stolen, nothing broken. Just an ordinary life paused mid-motion. Tom had no words for the hollow expanding inside him. Only questions, a gnawing unease, and the first tremors of a reality he wasn't ready to face. Detective Sarah Neal arrived on the second day, a calm presence with a firm handshake and eyes that seemed to measure everything and reveal nothing. She sat in Tom's living room, notebook balanced on her knee, nodding occasionally as he recounted the morning Rachel vanished. "No signs of forced entry. No signs of a struggle," she said after walking through the house. "A lot of people walk away when they want to disappear." Tom flinched. Rachel wouldn't just walk away. Not from me. Not from our kids. Neal's tone remained neutral. "Mr. Bennett, I understand this is difficult, but statistically, when an adult disappears and there's no sign of foul play, it's often a voluntary act." Voluntary. The word stung more than he expected. It didn't match the woman he knew. She was a mother who packed lunches with love notes tucked inside. A wife who made lists for everything, from groceries to holiday plans. Rachel was a planner, a nurturer, not an escape artist. Still, the evidence, or lack thereof, seemed to support the detective's theory. Two neighbors had claimed they saw Rachel walking alone early that morning, near the old bus station on the edge of town. One even said she looked distracted or in a hurry, though neither could say for certain if she'd boarded a bus. There was no security footage available. Cameras at the station hadn't worked in months. The trail ended there. Have you two had any recent arguments? Neil asked, pen poised. No more than usual, Tom replied. We've been married 14 years. Life has its moments, but nothing serious. Nothing that would make her leave. She scribbled something down. You'd be surprised what some people consider serious. The implication hung in the air like fog. Tom stared at her. Was she suggesting Rachel had left because of him? Within a week, the tone of the investigation shifted. The daily check-ins from police grew less frequent. The case quietly reclassified as voluntary disappearance. No Amber Alert. No missing persons posters from law enforcement. Only the ones Tom made himself, printing them late into the night with trembling hands. He called Rachel's sister, Jenna, hoping for insight or even just emotional support. But her tone was guarded. She told me things felt off, Jenna said, hesitating, that she was tired, worn out. She never said anything like that to me, Tom replied, stunned. Maybe that's the problem, Jenna whispered, and then hung up. That was the moment the foundation began to crack, not just beneath his marriage, but under everything else too. Friends stopped calling. The people who once offered casseroles and sympathy now avoided eye contact in the grocery store. Rumors spread like mold in the walls. One neighbor asked, casually, she didn't run off with someone, did she? Another added, you hear stories, mothers leaving their kids. Midlife crisis, maybe. Tom stopped going outside unless he had to. The walls of the house became both sanctuary and prison. Emily and Max noticed the change. They asked fewer questions about their mother. Or maybe they had simply learned that no one had the answers. 1 year. That's how long it had been since Rachel vanished. Since the morning that started like every other, then cracked their lives in half. Tom Bennett had stopped counting the days. Days had become tasks, checklists, damage control, meals to cook, laundry to fold, school drop-offs and dentist appointments. All of it performed with the frantic precision of someone trying to keep everything from slipping through his fingers. He had never planned to be a single parent, certainly not like this. Emily had grown quieter, her eyes heavy with a maturity that didn't belong to a 9-year-old. She had started waking up from nightmares she refused to talk about. Max, now 6, clung to his father more than ever, asking questions with painful innocence. Do you think Mommy will be home by my birthday? Did she get lost? Is she hiding? Tom always answered gently, never truthfully. Because the truth was, he didn't know. And that unknowing ate away at him more cruelly than any certainty ever could. The weight of parenthood bore down on him. Rachel had been the one who handled the kids' schedules, the school meetings, the doctor visits. Tom was learning everything from scratch. And he wasn't always perfect. A missed parent-teacher meeting. Forgotten permission slips. Max showing up to class without a lunch one day. All of it added up. It was enough to attract the attention of social services. A polite woman named Cassandra from Family and Child Welfare came by one Tuesday afternoon. Her voice was soft, but her clipboard was sharp. This is just standard procedure, Mr. Bennett. We've had a few reports of concern for school staff. He nodded, humiliated, as she walked through his home, asking about routines, emotional support, financial stability. He wanted to scream that he was doing his best, that he never asked to do this alone. But instead, he offered her tea and smiled like everything was fine. Later, after she left, he broke a plate in the sink just to feel something real. With nowhere to put his pain, Tom turned to his keyboard. One night, long after the kids had fallen asleep, he opened a blank browser and started typing. My wife disappeared without a trace 1 year ago. The police think she left us. Her friends say she was tired. But I knew her. I loved her. This isn't the end of her story. I just don't know how to tell the rest yet. He called it Silent Trails, a blog for missing persons, told through the eyes of those they left behind. What started as a private outlet slowly drew others. Comment from strangers with similar wounds, stories about husbands, wives, sisters, sons, people who had vanished like ghosts, and the loved ones forced to live in their shadows. It wasn't therapy in the traditional sense, but it was a lifeline, a place where his grief could breathe. Tom still avoided mirrors. He looked older than 38, lines around his eyes, shoulders hunched with quiet exhaustion. But in the dim glow of his laptop screen, he found flickers of purpose. Tom Bennett was 47 now. A decade had passed since the morning his world unraveled. 10 long years marked by birthdays without candles, holidays with empty chairs, and a steady erosion of questions without answers. Life hadn't returned to normal. It had simply reformed itself around the loss, like scar tissue around a wound. Emily was 18 now, a freshman at a nearby university, sharp-eyed and fiercely independent. Max, 16, had his mother's quiet smile and his father's stubbornness. They were both old enough to remember, but young enough to want to move on. Tom didn't blame them. He'd stopped expecting closure years ago. Stopped calling the police, stopped checking bus stations and shelters. The blog remained, but his posts had slowed. He'd shifted focus to his job, installing and managing security systems for local businesses and residential buildings. It was a quiet, meticulous line of work. Cameras didn't lie. They didn't vanish. They offered proof in a world where truth often felt slippery. It was a Tuesday when the past cracked open again. He was in the back office of Safeguard Systems, sorting through a client's archived surveillance footage. A restaurant had reported a series of minor thefts. Missing supplies, tampered registers. Nothing major, but enough to require a thorough review. The footage was grainy but clear enough. Tom clicked through timestamps, eyes moving automatically detached, until he saw her. It was only a second, a flash, but it stopped him cold. A woman entering the building just before dawn. Shoulder-length auburn hair, pulled back under a hoodie. She moved quickly, head slightly down. But the posture, the eyes, there was something unmistakable. Tom froze the frame, zoomed in, enhanced what little he could. He hadn't seen Rachel in 10 years. But every part of him screamed that this was her. The shape of her mouth, the angle of her jaw, the scar just beneath her left eyebrow, from when she fell off her bike at 14. His pulse thundered. This footage was only 3 weeks old. The timestamp showed the date and time, 4:46 a.m. on a Thursday. The building was a supply center in a small town 2 hours away. Ashwick, population just over 5,000. Tom had never even heard of it. He sat there for a long time, just staring. His world, once again, had shifted beneath his feet. He considered calling Emily, then thought better of it. What would he even say? His hand shook as he transferred the clip to his drive. He watched the segment again, and again, and again. Each time, the certainty inside him grew heavier. It wasn't just hope or projection. It was her, Rachel. After 10 years of silence, she had appeared not in a dream, not in a memory, but in a security feed he just happened to be reviewing. The odds were absurd, impossible even, and yet, there she was. The image was blurry, pixelated, not enough to hold up in a court of law, maybe, but more than enough to light a wildfire in Tom's chest. He stared at it on his phone as he waited outside the precinct, palms sweating, breath shallow. He hadn't stepped foot here in nearly a decade. Detective Sarah Neal hadn't changed much. A few more gray strands streaked her tied-back hair, maybe. Her presence still carried that quiet gravity, the kind that made people speak slower and stand straighter. She blinked in mild surprise when she saw him. "Tom Bennett," she said, folding her arms. "Wasn't expecting to see you again." "I didn't expect to be back," he replied, voice dry. "But I think I found her." In her office, he laid the phone carefully on the table, tapping the screen to bring up the still frame. For a long minute, she said nothing, just leaned forward, studying the image like it might blink back at her. "It's from a camera feed I was reviewing for work," Tom said. "A restaurant warehouse in Ashwick. I swear to you, Sarah, that's Rachel." She zoomed in, squinted. "The resolution's poor. I know. But look at the way she walks, the posture, the way she tucks her chin. And that scar, just below her eyebrow." Neil leaned back. "It's been 10 years, Tom. And she looks exactly like this." He shot back, tapping the photo again. "Older, yes. Different hair, maybe dyed. But it's her." She let out a slow breath. "You realize how many people go missing every year? How many false sightings come through my desk?" "This isn't just a sighting," Tom insisted. "I was assigned this footage by chance. I wouldn't be here if I wasn't sure." Neil watched him for a long time, then finally nodded toward the phone. You still have the original file? I do. With metadata and timestamp. That changed something. Her skepticism didn't vanish, but it softened at the edges. She turned to her computer, typing quickly, pulling up Rachel's missing persons file, long since archived, buried beneath more recent cases. She glanced between the photo on screen and the grainy image on his phone. Do you know anyone in Ashwick? She asked. No, never even been there. She tapped her pen against her notepad. That woman may not be your wife. You know that, right? Facial resemblance isn't enough, especially after 10 years. Tom nodded, but there was a fire behind his eyes that wouldn't be extinguished. But it might be, and that's more than I've had in a long time. Finally, she leaned back in her chair and rubbed her temple. All right, I'll reopen the file, provisionally. But this doesn't mean a task force or helicopters. This is low priority unless we have corroborating evidence. That's all I'm asking, Tom said quietly. A chance. Neil looked at him, something unreadable in her expression. Doubt, maybe, or a flicker of hope she didn't want to acknowledge. You still believe she didn't leave voluntarily? I never stopped. Ashwick was the kind of town that didn't show up on most maps unless you zoomed all the way in. One main street, 3 traffic lights, and a population that looked at strangers the way wild deer looked at sudden movement. Suspicious, wary, ready to bolt. Tom arrived just after sunrise, the morning fog still lingering between the narrow streets and clapboard houses. He hadn't told Emily or Max where he was going. Didn't know what to say. Didn't want to get their hopes up only to crush them again. The warehouse from the security footage was on the outskirts of town, surrounded by a chain-link fence and a few storage units. It looked abandoned that morning, silent and still. Nothing useful there anymore. The only clue he had left was her face, Rachel's face, and the name of the town. He started where anyone would, the local coffee shop. It was small, with 1 barista and 2 booths. The waitress behind the counter offered a tired smile as she poured his coffee. Ever seen her? Tom asked, sliding his phone across the table with the grainy still image pulled up. She glanced at it, shrugged. Hard to say. A lot of folks pass through here. But Tom saw the flicker in her eyes before she turned away. Recognition, quickly masked. He tried the grocery store next, then the library, then a gas station near the highway. Each time, the response was the same. Polite disinterest, vague answers, eyes that shifted too quickly. Ashwick was hiding something, or someone. By late afternoon, he was pacing the sidewalk, scanning every passerby with the barely restrained desperation of a man trying not to look like he was losing his mind. Maybe he was. He was about to give up for the day when he stepped into a dusty hardware store on a side street. An older man stood behind the counter, adjusting a stack of drill bits. His name tag read Walt. Tom hesitated, then pulled out the phone again. Sorry to bother you. I'm looking for someone. I think she might be here. Or was, recently. Walt stared at the photo for a long time, longer than anyone else had. I'm not sure, he said at last. But his tone betrayed him. Too slow, too careful. Tom leaned forward. Please, I'm not here to cause trouble. I'm just trying to find my wife. She's been gone 10 years. A beat, then another. Finally, Walt exhaled and scratched the back of his neck. People come here to get away, you know? To start over. But yeah, I've seen her. Not often. She doesn't come into town much. Tom's heart leapt. Do you know her name? Walt nodded slowly. Goes by Anna Collins. Lives a few miles out. Small cabin near the North Woods. Anna. A name like a lock on a door. A life she'd built away from him. Brick by careful brick. She have anyone with her? Walt hesitated. A little girl, maybe 7 or 8. Don't know if it's hers. Tom's breath caught. The world tilted, shifted. A child. A new name. A new life. The cabin was modest, nestled at the edge of a pine forest where the road turned to gravel and phone reception began to vanish. Tom parked far enough away not to be seen and walked the rest of the distance on foot. He felt like an intruder in someone else's dream, one where everything looked familiar, but nothing was quite right. From a ridge behind the trees, partially hidden by brush, he watched. She emerged from the cabin just after 8 a.m., wearing worn jeans and a denim jacket. Her hair was darker now, chestnut brown with streaks of gray, and cut shorter, curling just above her shoulders. But even from a distance, her movements betrayed her. The way she tucked her hair behind her ear, the tilt of her head when she listened. It was Rachel, or Anna. She moved like someone who had grown used to quiet, to simplicity. No trace of the woman who once darted between PTA meetings and birthday parties, who left notes on the fridge and hummed along to Fleetwood Mac while folding laundry. This woman carried herself with caution, deliberation, a survivor's grace. But it wasn't just her. A little girl trailed behind her, maybe 7 or 8 years old, with sandy hair in a loose braid, mismatched socks, and a too big backpack slung over one shoulder. She skipped when she walked, carefree and chatty, occasionally reaching up to take Rachel's, Anna's hand. Tom's breath hitched. That wasn't Emily. That wasn't Max. Who was this child? A daughter? Adopted? Someone else's child in her care? And why had she never come back? He followed them from a safe distance as they made their way into town. It turned out Rachel volunteered 3 mornings a week at the local shelter, a small building tucked beside the church, offering meals and donated clothes to families in need. Inside, she served soup, folded donated blankets, knelt beside people and listened. She laughed, sometimes, and every so often, she would glance out the window with a strange flicker in her eyes, as if looking for something that wasn't there. Tom stayed across the street, watching from inside his car. A part of him wanted to burst through the doors, shout her name, demand an explanation. But he didn't. Because what would he say? Why did you leave? Why didn't you take us with you? Why does this little girl know your name, and your own children don't? The questions churned inside him, loud and hot and unbearable. But so did the fear that if he approached, he'd break whatever fragile world she had built. Or worse, discover that she'd never meant to return at all. He watched them return home at dusk, the little girl clutching a painted rock she must have found on the way. Rachel knelt to tie her shoelace, gently brushing hair from her eyes. It was a mother's touch, tender, practiced. It should have destroyed him. But what hurt more than anything was this. She looked happy, and Tom, hidden in the shadows of her second life, felt like a ghost haunting a world that no longer needed him. He didn't know what was worse, the silence of the last 10 years, or the sound of her laughter without him. It took Tom 3 more days to work up the courage. 3 days of watching from across streets, hiding behind parked cars, and rehearsing conversations in his head that never made it past his lips. By then, the certainty had hardened in his chest like stone. This wasn't a case of mistaken identity. It was Rachel, living under the name Anna Collins, smiling, working, raising a child that wasn't theirs. And yet, with every hour he waited, a question whispered louder in his ear. What if she doesn't want to be found? On the 4th morning, he followed her to the shelter. She walked in with her usual easy rhythm, holding a paper bag of bread rolls. The little girl wasn't with her this time. That made it easier, or so he told himself. Tom crossed the street, heart hammering in his throat, and pushed open the door. The warmth inside hit him first. The scent of coffee and laundry detergent, soft murmurings of volunteers and visitors alike. Rachel was near the back, organizing blankets on a shelf. He stood in the entrance for a moment, watching her, trying to steady his breath. Then, almost without thinking, he said her name, quietly, like a prayer. Rachel. She turned. For a second, her eyes met his, and something flickered, a pause in time. Recognition? Confusion? A ghost from a past she buried? But then it vanished. I'm sorry, she said calmly, voice low and measured. You must be mistaken. His breath caught. No, Rachel, it's me, Tom. It's me. I think you should leave, she said, firmer now. You're making a scene. I'm not here to hurt you, he said, stepping forward. I need to know why. Her jaw clenched. You need to go. Please, just tell me the truth. Tell me what happened. Why did you leave? Why did you never come back to the kids? His voice cracked. They thought you were dead. She flinched at that. Barely. But she didn't soften. I don't know you, she said coldly. You have a wrong person. A staff member approached from the side, a young man in a tan vest with a radio clipped to his shoulder. Is there a problem here, Miss Collins? Tom turned to him, hands raised. No, I knew her. A long time ago. She was my wife. The man's eyes narrowed. Sir, I'm going to have to ask you to leave. Now, Rachel, Tom said again, voice trembling. Please, just look at me. She didn't. Her eyes fixed on the floor, her whole body stiff, as if bracing for an impact that never came. The guard took Tom by the elbow, guiding him toward the exit. Tom didn't resist. There was no point. Outside, the cold air struck him like a slap. He stood there, stunned, the world tilting beneath him. She hadn't screamed. She hadn't cried. She hadn't said his name. She'd acted like he didn't exist. Tom knew he couldn't do it alone anymore. After the confrontation at the shelter, after Rachel, Anna, looked straight through him like a stranger, the helplessness returned with crushing weight. But this time, it came laced with anger. Not just at her, but at himself. For waiting so long. For not digging deeper back then. For still not understanding why she had left. He needed help. Someone who could look where he couldn't. Someone who didn't carry 10 years of emotion like an anchor around their neck. That's when he found Luis Ramirez, a private investigator with a reputation for finding people who didn't want to be found. Luis was in his early 50s, sharp-eyed and soft-spoken, the kind of man who didn't waste time on small talk. His office was tucked in the back of a strip mall near downtown. No sign on the door, just a buzzer and a faint smell of burnt coffee inside. I don't usually take long-lost wife cases, Luis said, flipping through the photos and documents Tom laid out. They tend to end messy. But you've got something interesting here. Tom sat forward. She's alive. I saw her. She's living under a different name. She has a kid with her. But she looked me in the eye and said she didn't know me. Luis raised an eyebrow. Could be trauma. Could be manipulation. Could be both. Over the next few days, Luis got to work. And quickly, things began to surface. Things Tom had never known, and some he never thought to ask. The name Anna Collins had a paper trail, just enough to pass casual inspection. A driver's license issued in Idaho 3 years ago. A rental application for the cabin in Ashwick. Volunteer registration at the shelter. But all of it traced back to one forged birth certificate and a change of name filing in a different state under sealed mental health documents. Smart forgery, Luis noted. Not professional, but someone helped her. My guess. A support network. Someone protecting her. Then came the real shock. A medical record Luis pulled from a private source. Confidential, but incomplete. 2 years before she vanished, Rachel Bennett had been admitted for inpatient treatment at St. Adelaide Behavioral Health Center, 2 towns over. Diagnosis: major depressive disorder with anxiety features. Noted symptoms included insomnia, panic episodes, and, more disturbingly, dissociative tendencies. She never told me, Tom said, staring at the document. His voice was barely a whisper. Luis looked at him evenly. Mental health stigma's real. People hide things, even from the ones closest to them, especially from them. She was prescribed mood stabilizers and anti-anxiety medication. But after that, there was nothing. No follow-up. No indication she'd continued treatment. Luis leaned back. This changes things. If she was unwell and untreated, it could explain the false identity, the vanishing act, the total denial when you confronted her. But she looked stable, Tom said, the words feeling hollow even as he said them. She has a job. She's raising a child. She might be stable now. But what did it take to get her there? Luis asked. And what did she believe she was escaping from? Detective Sarah Neal hadn't intended to get involved again. Not really. After reopening the case at Tom's insistence, she had followed the standard protocol, made a few calls, and written the necessary reports. But something about the look in Tom's eyes, hollowed by time, but still sharp with purpose, had stayed with her. So when she drove out to Rachel's childhood home, now abandoned and listed for sale by a distant cousin, it wasn't because she had to. It was because some small voice inside her, call it instinct or conscience, whispered that something vital had been left behind. The house was a relic of another life, shuttered windows, dust-covered furniture, the air thick with a kind of stillness that only grew in places no one visited anymore. Sarah moved slowly, methodically. In the bedroom upstairs, once painted yellow, now faded to a sickly gray, she found a small, locked drawer in the bottom of an old dresser. It took only a moment to pick. Inside was a faded, cloth-bound journal. No name on the cover, but when she flipped through the first few pages, she saw the handwriting. Rachel's. Sarah sat down and began to read. Some nights, I feel like the walls are listening. I hear footsteps that don't belong. I feel watched, not just by Tom, but by everything. I know how that sounds, but what if I'm right? He says he's worried about me, that I need rest. But I see the way he looks at me when I forget to answer. The way he talks to the kids when I'm not around. What if he's planning something? I love my children more than anything, and I would die before I let someone take them from me. I won't let that happen. I can't. Sometimes I think he reads this, that he opens it when I'm asleep, but he smiles like nothing's wrong, like he's already decided what the story will be if I disappear. Sarah paused, her breath shallow. There were entries dated only weeks before Rachel vanished. Disjointed thoughts, rapid sentences, repeated phrases like "they don't believe me," "he's pretending," "the children are not safe." The writing grew more erratic with each page. Darker ink, larger letters, more crossings out. There was no clear mention of violence, no specific threat, but the undercurrent of fear was overwhelming. And then one entry stopped her cold. If this journal is found, maybe someone will understand. Maybe someone will know it wasn't madness. I just couldn't wait for the moment they came for me. I had to act first. I had to disappear before the story ended with me in a hospital or a grave. When Sarah closed the journal, her hands trembled. It was hard to know what to make of it. Was this the diary of a woman descending into delusion? A textbook case of untreated psychosis, paranoia, feeding on isolation and fear? Or was there truth buried beneath the panic? Had Rachel seen something no one else had? Something even Tom had failed to recognize? Back at her office, Sarah didn't immediately call him. She sat with the journal for hours, rereading passages, trying to separate fear from fact. Rachel had been convinced that her children were in danger. She hadn't run from them. She had run for them. In her mind, Tom wasn't just a husband. He was a possible threat. Whether that was grounded in reality or distorted by illness was still unclear. But one thing was undeniable. Rachel hadn't simply vanished. She had planned her disappearance, with careful, terrified precision, and she had done it believing that the greatest danger was in staying. The truth, when it came, didn't fall like a hammer. It crept in slowly, like a shadow spreading at dusk, almost invisible at first, until it touched everything. Luis Ramirez had been digging deeper into Rachel's background, cross-referencing every trace of Anna Collins with fragments of Rachel Bennett's past that had been long dismissed or overlooked. What he found shifted the ground beneath their feet. It started with a name buried in a court archive: Daniel Foster, Rachel's older half-brother. A man who had once been in and out of her life during childhood, then disappeared from family gatherings sometime after 2005. Arrested twice, once for harassment, once for stalking. Both times, the charges had been dropped due to insufficient evidence. But the pattern was there. The complaints had a chilling familiarity: unwanted visits, anonymous notes, phone calls at night. The second case involved an ex-girlfriend who had moved states to escape him. Luis brought the file to Sarah Neal in person. "You missed this," he said, sliding the folder across her desk. "We all did." Sarah opened it in silence, her brow furrowing as she read. There were statements, police interviews, a restraining order Rachel had filed 9 months before her disappearance. Tom sat across from them, stunned. "She never told me," he said, voice hoarse. "She never even mentioned a brother." "Maybe she was trying to protect you," Sarah said softly. "Or maybe she knew no one would believe her." Rachel had reported Daniel for repeated harassment, voicemails, showing up outside their house late at night, a dead bird left in their mailbox. She told authorities she feared he wanted to harm her or take her children. But the case went nowhere. No witnesses, no fingerprints, no clear threats, just fear. And fear wasn't enough for an arrest. She wasn't imagining it, Sarah said, her voice heavy with regret. She wasn't paranoid. She was terrified. Tom stared down at the file, hands clenched. "All this time, I thought she'd run from me. I thought I'd done something wrong. And she was trying to protect our family." "We failed her," Sarah admitted, eyes glistening. "The system did." For the first time in 10 years, Tom felt a strange mixture of grief and vindication. All those sleepless nights, wondering what he'd missed, what invisible fracture in their marriage had driven her to vanish, and the truth had been standing just beyond the spotlight the whole time. The image of Rachel's journal came back to him now, clearer than ever. I just couldn't wait for the moment they came for me. She hadn't meant him. She had meant Daniel. Sarah leaned forward. We'll reopen the harassment file. I want to know where he is. If he's still a threat. I need to see her again, Tom said. She needs to know I understand now. That I believe her. Sarah nodded, slowly. We'll do it right this time. The girl's name was Lila. Tom didn't learn this from Rachel, but from Luis, who had managed, with quiet persistence, to interview a few people at the Ashwick shelter where Rachel, under the name Anna Collins, volunteered. Most were reluctant at first. Ashwick was a town that protected its own, and Anna was one of theirs now. But eventually one woman talked. Her name was Marta, a retired nurse, now volunteering part-time. She saved that child's life, Marta said. Pulled her out of the fire with her own hands. The fire had happened 6 years ago, long after Rachel disappeared. A malfunctioning heater sparked an electrical blaze at a family shelter in a nearby town. Several families were displaced. One woman, badly burned, didn't survive. Her daughter, Lila, was pulled from the smoke-filled hallway by a stranger who refused to leave without her. That stranger was Rachel. There were no papers, Marta explained. The girl had no one left. Child Protective Services was overwhelmed, and Anna, she just took her. No legal adoption. Just love. Tom sat in silence, absorbing the story like a stone sinking in water. Lila wasn't Rachel's daughter. Not biologically. But the way Rachel had looked at the girl, the way she had tied her shoes, brushed her hair, smiled down at her with a tenderness Tom still remembered. It hadn't been an act. She had become a mother again, but in a world without names or records. A mother in exile. And more than that, she had saved her. Luis continued. The few people who know the full story say Rachel rarely talks about her past. She's protective, almost secretive, especially around Lila. When they ask her if she has any family left, she just says, not anymore. The words pierced Tom like a blade. Rachel had created a life in hiding. Not out of selfishness, but out of necessity. A life born in fire, grief, and survival. She had buried her past so deeply that even the people closest to her now didn't know her real name. And always, she had lived with one eye over her shoulder, fearing that someone would come looking. Not Daniel, but Tom. She thought I would take her back, he said bitterly. Take her away from that girl. For her second chance. Luis nodded. You were the face of the old world. The world where she was afraid. Where no one believed her. Tom sat back, breath shallowed. He had come all this way searching for answers. For closure. For his wife. But she wasn't his wife anymore. She was someone else now. Anna Collins, a woman who had clawed her way out of fear and madness to build something new, fragile and beautiful in its own strange way. He had thought finding her would heal something inside him. That maybe she'd want to return. That she missed the life they once had. But Rachel hadn't been waiting to be found. She had been praying to stay hidden. And the hardest truth of all was this. She wasn't lost anymore. She had simply gone on without him. Tom waited until Sunday evening. He couldn't find the words, not at first. How do you tell your children that the person they spent their childhood mourning wasn't dead, just gone by choice? He had rehearsed it a dozen different ways, short, gentle, detailed, vague. None of them felt right. They were sitting in the living room. Emily home from university for the weekend. Max sprawled across the couch, headphones half off. Tom muted the television, and for a long moment, he just stood there, staring at their faces, so much older than when she left. So much like her. I need to tell you something, he finally said. About your mom. They froze. What about her? Emily asked cautiously. I found her. Silence. Emily blinked. Max sat up straight, removing the headphones. Tom kept going, slowly, like stepping into cold water. She's alive. She's been living in a town a couple hours from here. She goes by another name, Anna Collins. She works at a shelter. She's raising a little girl. The words felt unreal, even as he said them. Emily's face contorted first, disbelief melting into fury. You what? Max's voice was smaller. She's alive. She left because she was scared, Tom said, trying to keep his voice steady. She was being stalked by someone for her past. She thought no one would believe her, and she thought we were all in danger. Emily stood, And instead of talking to us, she just disappeared, left her family, me. Tom swallowed. I don't think she was well. She was trying to protect us in the only way she knew how. She let us think she was dead. Emily shouted, tears filling her eyes. I wrote her eulogy in 6th grade. I cried myself to sleep for years. Max, quieter but no less shaken, asked, "Can I see her?" Emily turned to him, stunned. "What?" "I want to know why," Max said. "I need to see her face when she says it." Emily shook her head and stormed out, slamming the door to her room. Tom didn't follow. He sat down next to Max and placed a hand on his shoulder. "I'm going to meet her," he said. "One last time. No yelling. No blame. Just to understand. You can come with me if you want." Max hesitated, then nodded. But the next morning, Max changed his mind. "I want to meet her," he said, "but not yet. Not until I know what I want to say." Tom understood, and so he drove to Ashwick alone. The trees along the highway blurred past his window like fading years. He had no script, no demands, just questions he wasn't sure had answers, and the weight of his children's pain wrapped around him like a second skin. He arrived just as the sun was beginning to set, the sky streaked in amber and violet. The cabin looked the same, quiet, weathered, ordinary. Rachel stepped out before he could knock. She didn't run, didn't hide. They stood facing each other for the first time in 10 years. No lies left between them, only the wreckage of everything they used to be. "Hello, Tom," she said, voice soft and tired. "Hi, Rach." The inside of the cabin was quiet, intimate in a way that stung. Worn books stacked in corners. A child's drawings pinned to the fridge. A kettle on the stove, humming softly. It looked like a life. Rachel sat on the edge of the couch, her hands clasped, knuckles pale. Tom stood for a moment, uncertain, then lowered himself into the armchair opposite her. They stared at each other in silence, the air charged with everything unsaid. "I wasn't sure you'd come," she said at last. "I almost didn't," Tom replied. "But I had to. For me. For the kids." Her face tightened. "Are they okay?" "No," he said honestly. "They're hurting, but they're alive. They've built something, just like you." Rachel nodded, eyes shimmering. "I never stopped thinking about them." "Then why didn't you come back?" A breath, then another, and then the truth, raw and naked. "I wasn't saying, Tom. I mean, I didn't know at the time. I thought I was protecting them. From you. From a world. From shadows that followed me everywhere. I was convinced someone was watching us. That something terrible was coming." Tom's jaw tightened, but he said nothing. "I saw things that weren't there," she continued. "Or maybe they were. I don't know. The fear was real. It gripped me so tightly I couldn't tell what was true anymore. When Daniel started sending those letters, when the police brushed it off, something in me cracked." "You could have told me," Tom whispered. "I didn't trust anyone," she said, her voice shaking. "Not even you. That's what the sickness did. It took away my ability to trust the one person I should have leaned on." He looked down, swallowing the bitterness. "You let us grieve you." Rachel leaned forward, tears brimming now. "I know. I hated myself every day. I wanted to come back so many times, but I convinced myself I didn't deserve to, that I had broken something that couldn't be fixed." Tom inhaled slowly. "And the girl? Lila?" Her lips trembled into a sad smile. "A miracle. Or maybe a second chance. I found her when I thought I was beyond saving. She gave me a reason to breathe again, to be useful, to feel like maybe I could still love without hurting someone." "And what about us?" he asked. "What does this mean now?" She looked at him, pain and love and shame tangled in her eyes. "I can't be who I was, Tom. That version of me died the day I walked out the door. But I remember her. I remember how she loved you, how fiercely she loved our children." He nodded slowly, a weight loosening in his chest. "I forgive you." Rachel's eyes widened. "But I won't forget," he added. "And I won't lie to the kids. They deserve the truth, whatever parts you're ready to share." She wiped her face, breathing unevenly. "I want to try, even if they hate me. I'll take that." "I don't think they'll hate you," Tom said. "I think they'll need time. But that's something we still have." 1 year later, the Bennett family sat together at a dining table that had once been too large, too quiet, too haunted. Now it was full. Plates clinked. Laughter came in soft bursts. There was an awkwardness still, a cautiousness in the way everyone navigated the space between past and present. But beneath it pulsed something alive. Hope. The journey back had not been easy. Rachel didn't return home. Not exactly. She and Lila remained in Ashwick, where the small town that once guarded her now embraced the truth of who she was. But every other weekend, Rachel came to visit. And slowly, the space between her and her children narrowed. They started therapy, all of them. Emily, Max, Tom, even Rachel. The early sessions were brutal, raw with accusation and tears. But they showed up. That was the rule. No matter how much it hurt, they kept showing up. Emily, once filled with rage, eventually agreed to meet Rachel for lunch. That lunch turned into a walk. The walk into long conversations in the park. She didn't call her mom at first, but one day she did. Quietly. Rachel didn't cry then, not in front of her, but Tom saw the way her fingers trembled for the rest of the afternoon. Max forgave quicker. He asked questions, difficult ones, but his heart was wide open. "I just want to know you didn't stop loving us," he said one day. "I never did," Rachel told him. "I just stopped knowing how to be myself." Now, as the family gathered for Thanksgiving, their first holiday together in over a decade, Lila sat beside Max, giggling at something he whispered to her. Emily carved the turkey with mock ceremony, and Rachel lit candles along the window ledge. A habit, she said, helped her feel grounded. Tom watched it all from the kitchen doorway, a glass of wine in hand, a small, tired smile on his face. There had been no miracle fix. The scars were still there, invisible, yes, but deeply felt. Trust rebuilt itself like bone, slowly, painfully, cell by cell. But there was connection now. Real, tentative love rediscovered after 10 years of silence. After dinner, as the fire crackled in the hearth and the kids watched an old movie, Rachel stepped beside Tom. "They're stronger than I ever imagined," she whispered. "So are you," he replied. She nodded, eyes shining. "Do you ever think about how it all started? That moment? That camera?" Tom glanced at her. "I think about what it showed. But more than that, I think about what it didn't." The camera hadn't captured the fear in her heart, the confusion, the sense of drowning that had followed her for years. It hadn't seen the panic in the middle of the night, or the way she'd memorized exit routes in every building she entered. It hadn't recorded the quiet resilience it took to survive. It hadn't seen the part where she found her way back, not just to them, but to herself. "I'm not proud of what I did," Rachel said. "You don't have to be," Tom answered. "You just have to keep being here." And she was. Not the same woman who vanished. Not quite the same family waiting for her return. But something new. Something made not from what they had lost, but from what they were willing to build again, day by day, word by word, hand by hand. And in that moment, surrounded by warmth and flickering candlelight, Tom finally understood. What the camera couldn't see was the most important part of all. Healing. Forgiveness. And the quiet, stubborn persistence of love.